until this point, you've likely thought of grammar as a series of rules for your sentences, of do's and don'ts for writing and speaking that you may or may not have been taught in a formal way. You've maybe been told your grammar's bad, or been given a paper that you wrote back with the words "work on your grammar" written somewhere on it without really knowing what that means. Well, grammar is a system or structure of a language, which includes rules for the way that we use words in sentences. When something is rhetorical, it means that it's designed to persuade a reader or a listener in one way or another. Rhetoric is the study of using language in intentional ways to get readers or listeners to think about issues differently, or to change their beliefs or actions. People who study rhetorical grammar then, and that's us this semester, understand that language, even down to the very sentences we use, is social. You speak and write very differently when you're with your friends than you will when you're writing for this class. You probably speak differently to your parents than you do when you're with your friends. And you know to do that, to modulate your language for different people in your life, because the relationship that you have with me or with your parents is very different from the relationship that you have with your friends. That's having a social awareness of language. Being rhetorical with your word choices while writing just means that you're even more aware of the words you write, because you're not just communicating ideas straightforwardly, you're writing to try to persuade. My goal in this class, in coming at grammar rhetorically, rather than as a series of rules you're probably breaking, is to equip you with choices for the sentences that you write, so that your writing says what you want it to say and does the rhetorical work that you're wanting it to do. I'm hoping to help you see that all the writing you do is social, written for a particular audience with a particular aim in mind, and that the choices you make with the words you write can amplify your message with particular audiences. So what's an example? Well, we're leading off our study of rhetorical grammar with active versus passive voice. I feel like this principle is a good place to start because writing a sentence in active voice or writing it in passive voice really is a choice. Neither is wrong per se. They just have different effects. So for example, if I came home and I asked my spouse, "Hey, did you feed the dog?" And he said to me, "Yeah, the dog was fed." This isn't to me the most helpful response. Technically, he's answering my question. The dog has been fed. But because he didn't own the action, he didn't say, "I fed the dog," his response brings up more questions than answers. Especially if he says it in a real dodgy way, like, yeah, the dog got fed. Then I'm like, what happened? Like, did the child feed the dog or something? Like, what exactly did the dog get fed? It's like he's omitting information by stating it in the passive voice. If he just said, "I fed the dog," in active voice, that is with the I as the doer of the action or the feeding, it's so much more straightforward. But saying "the dog was fed" instead of "I fed the dog" represents a choice, a rhetorical choice, to use active voice or passive voice, because the two constructions have different effects. Okay, so I want you to watch the next video in this sequence, written or produced by the Purdue Owl, that goes deeper into active versus passive voice and why, as a general principle, you might want to try to author active sentences in your papers unless there's a compelling reason to write them passively. And then I'm going to ask you to go in and revise your creative nonfiction piece with active versus passive voice in mind, to identify sentences that are written in passive voice. No, scratch that, just like you see on the page, that you wrote in passive voice, and to correct them, just like I did there.